G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks After Ukraine War Update for the 19th of August 2026. In today's show, first we're going to look at the Ukrainian map, then we're going to hear from Mikhail Fedorov, what's happening at the Zaporizhzhia power plant, the Russian claim of liberation of two communities, Russia's warning to UK over drone use. We'll go quite into detail over that and what could happen and what is happening between the UK and Russia. There's been another arrest in Russia of a Ukrainian spy. And then we're going to look at Russian drone production and what's going on there. All right, hold on a moment. All right, try that again. There we go, right page. All righty then. Oh yes, and also there's been a special evacuation order issued by the President of Ukraine. Yes, a mandatory evacuation rule for children and their parents has been declared in the various territorial communities over here in Ukraine. Now, as you can see, it's nowhere near the current front line. And hard to say, it has been attacks on this road, but still, Russian troops only been up here in the last month and were pushed back, although the Russians are pushing back and have gained 0.01% of territory in the Donetsk area. Still, it is unusual given that usually the evacuations are only done when the Russian troops are estimated to be a month away, although sometimes it takes Russia 2 to 3 months. At the current rate, it's going to be years before they get to that area, even if Russia was going to expand beyond, which unfortunately we don't know whether or not they will. So it's a matter of, do you think Zelensky's taking precautions because of the increased attacks in south of these towns? Or it's propaganda stunt to rile up the population of Ukraine with more internal displacement, causing more friction, which for now appears to be politically advantageous to Ukraine, and also gives them land later to claim when inevitably these people leave Ukraine. Because most of the displaced peoples are relocated to other countries. Do you think this is just basically selling migrants for short-term gain? After all, the left's goal is to displace all peoples so no one has a homeland, no one has a national identity, no one has any love or loyalty to anything other than the political body. It is anti-human at every level. Now, there have been drone and missile strikes on Kiev. What's this marker again? The green one. What's the green one? Yes. Video address from the former defense minister. We'll get to that later. Kryvyi has been hit several times, so has Odessa. There's been multiple attacks by Ukraine on Zaporizhzhia. Yeah, Ukraine attacking its own territory is not new, by the way, because don't forget, there are Russians in Zaporizhzhia. They are holding the nuclear power plant. Yeah, and they've actually been holding off. Parts of Zaporizhzhia are under Russian control, allegedly. We don't know to what extent. We just know that uh, Ukraine is not very happy about the Russian control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, even though it was built, maintained, and under a security arrangement, was under Russian control for a long time before there was a war. Now, there's been attacks by Russia in multiple places along the. Yeah, here we go. So we don't always get the targets. Now, it's interesting. There's a lot. The Russians have again unleashed a huge artillery barrage into Sumy. And attacked positions north of Sumy. Again, opening up a new front. As you can see, there are lots of little openings along the border. Russia is slowly building its buffer zone. But this buffer zone has been quite the molasses, although there has been progress today. Really, it's progress over the last week. But there really isn't much to report. Nor is there much to report about Kupiansk, though there has been small gains there as well. The Russians have not made any significant gains elsewhere. Other than the two towns, most of the map remains static. Little gains here and there outside of towns, but nothing of significance. Nothing of significance has changed in Krasnopodolye. The Russians still struggle to expel the remaining Ukrainians. Even though they have had victories elsewhere, they have not been able to completely cut off, nor does Russian doctrine allow for a complete encirclement. Now, this may go back and may, to previous engagements where the Russians have found encirclement just forces the encircled to dig in and fight for longer rather than an immediate surrender. Plus, I don't think they want them to surrender. I think they want to grind them down. So they let them stay. So they can slowly move up on them. Let them grind out. Let them waste their time and resources. In the Russian eyes, they're winning. So they have no reason to allow a merciful surrender in their eyes. And that, of course, is going to have a long hardening on both sides, where there is going to be decades before. And you look at how bitter Korea is, so it gives you some idea there's a lot of bitterness in Ukraine, yet the Ukrainians won't accept the fact. They won't accept their responsibilities. They always want, but they're backed by the political left in Europe, so, I know, new artillery strike. They pop up every so often. The fighting is ongoing. Most of the time when I'm reporting is when the fighting has come to an end and you know who's retreated and who's advanced. But lately it's been combat days have been lasting longer. They start very early, of course. But the Russians are closing the gap here to put pressure on, but not to completely cut off this area. But they have not popped the lines at Savaka. They are trying to go around, and they are trying to push. They have made small advances here. But this remains. These nuts. These are hard nuts, and the Russians haven't been able to crack them. They've been able to go around positions, but ultimately have not been able to push the Ukrainians further back. And I believe it's only going to get harder and bloodier the closer they get to the end of the war. And it looks like they've all but taken this town, although they claimed it a long time ago. Yeah, they've not been... There's parts of the map where they have claimed towns and get pushed back. Other parts they've been able to push past. Here, particularly these two, they have not been able to push past. It comes down to the point where when you've fought someone long enough, you get to the point where you know each other's moves, you know their moods, you know when they're up in the morning, you know when they're cranky, and you know when they're going to attack and how they're going to attack. This is why troops are rotated, and however, in a lot of places, there hasn't been a full rotation in a long time, only replacements. Now, the Russians were rotating, and quite often, to keep, but the cost in fuel and time, and the net results, although were greater than they are now, I think the economic cost was too high, and so let's see how that plays out. But the Russians are back here, and they're pushing out in areas, but for so far, no significant gains. They're still continuing to push here, and they're now starting to get Ukrainian infiltrations through this through the sides here. The Russians have to constantly be on the guard because the lines are so irregular. But even then, drones are making battle lines move and shift constantly because it's pretty much remote control your war now. But in an attempt to slow the drones and other military supplies, yet again the dockyards at Odessa were hit. Now, before I continue on to the news, Empire Valves, that's one word, Empire Valves at myshopify.com. This channel is sponsored by you, the viewing audience, so please support the channel today. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. As I mentioned, Mikhail Fedorov, the ousted defense minister, has called for elections. He's put out a video.
Ukraine's recently ousted defense minister, Mikhail Fedorov, is calling for the country to prepare for elections despite a law banning them during its war with Russia. In a video posted on social media, Fedorov accused the government of, quote, systematic crisis of governance and lashed out at what he called wartime corruption. The popular ex-defense minister was sacked last month. His dismissal triggered weeks of protests in Ukraine, with people calling for Fedorov to be reinstated.
повинні відповісти на фундаментальне питання.
We must answer a fundamental question. How should a state function if the war lasts for years? And the next, what if the war continues for another year, 2, 3? Can Russia effectively be given the right to dictate when Ukrainians can choose their government again? I am convinced that the answer is no. Democracy cannot be held hostage by Russia. We are fighting precisely because we want to remain a free European state. Therefore, we must find a legal, safe, and realistic mechanism that will allow Ukraine to restore a full democratic process, even amidst a prolonged war.
Very clever. Well said, but a very clever video nonetheless. And he's absolutely right. However, he's wrong about a number of things, but of course, it's not just Russia holding Ukraine hostage now, isn't it? Whenever Russia has offered peace deals, Ukraine hasn't honoured them. Whenever Russia had arranged ceasefires, you use them to rearm and attack Russia. And so, since 2023, Russia will not accept any overtures or peace deals, other than an absolute end to hostilities. Now, Ukraine refuses. Other nations refuse to hold Ukraine accountable if it breaks its word. This situation is complicated by the arrogance of the liberal establishment in America, both the Democrat Party and all the Labour parties and unions across Europe who control Europe. Even when they lose elections, they use threats and intimidation of worker strikes, bullying, the bureaucracy. So really, it's the European bureaucracy who controls Europe and thus controls this war. But Ukraine is right, and he's right about Ukraine needing to restore democracy because they are not a functional democracy anymore. Their wartime powers, though limited, do strictly forbid elections in national crises for 90 days. After that, it was supposed to be decided what to do. Well, when it went to court, Zelensky kept getting his way. Again, through threats and intimidation. He's fired people. He's had people arrested. He's had journalists arrested. And Europe just sits there blindfolded throughout the majority of the world sits by blindfolded throughout this. People turned against their own country in Vietnam and America because of a coup in Southeast Asia. The General Tay. So what the same people today will tell you to support Zelensky. Yet what's the difference? What's the difference? Yeah, whose side? Yeah, it's all the time. It's the same thing. The left don't have morals. They only have my side. And everyone else is a far-right boogeyman, you know? That's not a functional democracy. Now, Russia's reporting Ukrainian drone strikes near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Concern over security has been rife since the war began 5 years ago. There is a security operation at the power plant, but power plant workers have been killed and wounded. And it's getting to the point where they're going to have to probably shut it down. Number of injuries. The International Atomic Agency tries to confirm reports, but they either don't publish it, they don't show up, or they leave Ukraine's name out of it. But it's still vital, important. But the thing is, they could produce nearly 6 gigawatts of energy, and the plant was crucial to supplying power to Ukraine. But all the reactors have been shut down since Russia captured the plant. But a strike could cause damage and potential radioactive leaks. But what Russia's really worried about is the radioactive material. And Europe won't let them evacuate it. So you have a stalemate at the plant. You have a stalemate with the Atomic Security Agency. You have a stalemate in the UN. And you have a failure of governments around the world to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Now, some countries have been ludicrous in their approach to this war, and others have been calling all along, and not many, for an end to this war. Now, I can understand why South Korea and Taiwan are looking at this war from a technical standpoint, in that if they ever found themselves at war again, they would have to resort to the same drone and missile tactics of Ukraine against China. From South Korea's perspective, they have 2 fronts to worry about. I think both countries need a bit of slack, because from a technical perspective, there's no other opportunity for them to learn and adapt. However, Russia has advanced probably 0.1% overall of the, giving Russia control of about 19.34% of Ukraine. Now, they're not reporting many casualties on the Ukrainian side. That comes to roughly 1,500. Yeah. So there isn't that many combat. There wasn't that many combat deaths or that much combat action reported. The big story, however, is Russia's warning to UK. Now, this is not some feckless barking by a chihuahua. Russia is a very capable state. It may not have the firepower of NATO, but it has, in conventional arms, it may not exceed the firepower of NATO. Economically, it is only as powerful as Italy economically. NATO has all the advantages except in nuclear. And when it comes to nuclear weapons, Russia outmatches deployment. Now, Russia's embassy has warned, but short of war, what could Moscow do? Well, according to NATO, the most likely response is to continue their hybrid war and asymmetric subversion. They'll find ways to retaliate not just against the UK, but against Europeans. They will continue to ramp up its tensions with non-military tactics, such as surveillance drones in the Baltic and its ships coming out of the fog and just outside of the international waters boundary. They have carried out intimidation tactics before. Now, some of these are quite legal, such as flying aircraft near borders. However, physical subversion and sabotage is not legal. And according to, The Guardian, take it with a grain of salt that Russia is behind it and not China or India, because, let's face it, a lot of people don't know, but heck, even Brazil, they all operate asymmetrical warfare programs against other countries to exert their dominance. India and China are particularly engaged in sabotaging each other, as well as India sabotaging China in Nepal, Pakistan in Kashmir. So, take it with a grain of salt, Russia's not the only country doing this, but Russia may not be the only country operating in the UK either. Now, recent security concerns did omit India. No, not surprised given the number of Indians in the UK government. It's completely radical. The radicals are so enamored with power, they will sell out to Indian interests for the token positions that they are given in the government, because they're secure jobs for life as traitors. They don't care about the future, yours or mine. So, Russia's ramped up sabotage operations, according to The Guardian, with local proxies and carrying out incendiary attacks at DHL, as well as targeting. Now, these parcels are not just targeting cargo facilities, but cargo planes and ships. Now, recently, there was industrial sabotage at a drone production facility. There was also infrastructure. Recently, there was disruption to GPS services, as well as Starlink and the internet at transatlantic cables. While cables weren't cut, they believe that Russia may be able to cut the lines, as well as energy pipelines. And they could cut the power lines from offshore windmills, or just disrupt them. Another one is assassination of high-profile defectors and informants. Now, the primary cases that usually make the news are only cyber attacks and digital warfare, such as ransom attacks. Now, it's believed that state-sponsored hackers were behind the NHS attack, the attack on power grids, as well as a mass disinformation campaign. Now, I've been accused of being Russian disinformation, yet so many times I've warned you against and tried to even explain how they carry out fake news attacks to exploit your paranoia about Russia. Right? Other states will disguise themselves as Russians or use disillusioned Russians and Ukrainians in the UK to carry out political division attacks to accelerate and exacerbate unrest. Well, generally it would be to support public support for Ukraine. But there are genuine people out there that other groups will associate with Russia, and so they try to lump all grievances together. If you keep making assumptions that everything is Russian, you'll ignore the attacks by China and India, as well as isolating the genuine fears of citizens while you get pushed into the arms through a series of false flag attacks of supporting India's takeover of the UK. As they continue to use migrants to dilute your vote, to the point where there are towns where the whole council is now Muslim because 10 times the local population has just moved in. That's colonialism. And if you continue to ignore this, and if you continue to do this because it's the only way that you can win elections, and if winning every election makes you feel is the only way you can feel good, then you will be constantly manipulated by outsiders. And China wants to destroy the UK, and if they hand it to Russia or India, they just consider that a short-term win. So China and India will continue to exploit this war for their own purposes and lay the blame at Russia, which means if you continue to make assumptions, you cannot make informed decisions about the future of your country, and you'll be pushed into a war that you did not want or ask for, just because the British Labour Party also wants to destroy national identity, family, and all the other things. They have stated these goals in the past, but the British public in general continues to bury their head in the sand and ignore all the warnings about communists. Now, one of the and I highly condemn this, is jamming civilian GPS. That the major flight disruption of flights in Europe should not have. Yeah. Now, the last, of course, is the last and most common act Russia does is provocative incursion. Unmanned surveillance aircraft flying close to British industrial sites and military hubs because they're so cheap. You can shoot them down, jam them. They're cheap. Some of them are only $300. Now, the traitor, Andrew Burnham, has come out and said the UK government was committed to Ukraine 100% and will deliver 150,000 more drones to Kiev by the end of the year. We don't know how many of these drones make it. We don't know how many drones don't make it. All we know is the British Labour will continue to provoke war to drain Russia in the interests of China and India. I have told you many times, BRICS is a house of vipers who have all got knives out for Russia. But they're not the only ones. Ultimately, China and India are going to go head to head. For now, Russia has dramatically increased its drone production. It hopes to reach output in excess of the combined output of Ukraine's partners. To do this, they have set up production in Tatarstan of small and tactical first-person drones. They have highly decentralized their drone production into smaller facilities, repurposed many industrial spaces, and they hope to produce, and I'm not kidding, 1 million drones of and missiles combined of various payloads annually. 1 million. Now, it would make sense. Now, integration. The entire unmanned system force is being completely integrated into a new, distinct military branch, just like the rocket forces was. So you'll have Russian Air Force, Russian rocket forces, Russian Marines, the Marine Services, and the Russian ground forces, and the Russian Aerospace Forces, and now the Unmanned System Forces. Now, these new branches and tactical reorganization is going to take some time. They've yet to officially name anything or completely, but they are in the process of reorganizing their entire army. And that includes state takeovers of critical industry. Now, they have a maritime, land and air drone doctrine that has challenges for now. 1. Jet-powered variants can carry heavier payloads and longer, but they need better onboard guidance and faster onboard guidance and video processing, as well as radio-linked modems rather than strict pre-run flight paths. Supply chain pressures, particularly GPUs. Forget investing in GPUs. That's only short term. Soon, there'll be dedicated AI chips that they will slot into motherboards with their own memory. And Russia's not the only one developing these. Tesla, NVIDIA, AMD, they're all developing, I forget their name, but they are processors for AI, dedicated processors, and they're 10 times faster than GPUs. Now, Russia cannot produce anywhere near the technological marvels of North America, but most of your production is in China. Whether you could say Taiwan all you like, but Taiwan isn't that big that you can have that. So most of your production is either China, India, or Mexico. And China has easy access to everything in China, somewhat reasonable access in India, and some access to plants in China and in Mexico through the Mexican Mafia and other organizations. Allegedly, this has been the allegations. The Mexican Mafia and other organizations deny ties with China. Doesn't mean these organizations are... Look, one of the things spies do is get into criminal networks because it gives them a cover so they can operate freely. China is well known for working with criminal organizations around the world. So is India. India was working with India was working with the opium cartels long before they were criminal organizations, just to undermine China and supply opium into China. So when you say British opium wars, it's really Indian-British opium wars. And you don't think China forgets that? But ultimately, the biggest vulnerability is electronics. Both Russian production and parallel Ukrainian production are primary targets for each other. Not just interdiction, but sabotage. There are specific models with pros and cons, individual supply chain problems, Drone and counter-drone strategies are changing the usefulness of models. Ultimately, Russia can outproduce Ukraine, but it can't outproduce Europe. It can try. But Europe has its own vulnerabilities, and if their production continues to fall, then Russia might be able to catch up and surpass them. But for now, Russia has surpassed only the drone production in Eastern Europe. Now, these drones are big and heavy and not as maneuverable as, you see in TV ads. But they are still quite consequential. A 50-kilogram explosive in the right place will do far more damage than lots of bombing. It's called bang for buck, right? The thing that really bankrupted Germany was trying to bomb England into submission. But as the cost in bombers and manpower was huge, and eventually they ran out of air force. Russia does not want to make that mistake, I tell you. They know what would happen. But Russia, right now, is banking on America going to war in Iran to bog down more and more forces so that Russia and other BRICS countries could prepare asymmetric warfare against the world unimpeded. Because the majority of Westerners will just run around clucking about Russia, turning a blind eye to India and China, India particularly. Europe would gladly sacrifice UK. They are so desperate for peace anywhere but except against Russia. So it is such an ideological capture. It's not logical. It's all emotional. It's all, and they keep justifying it with, it's all carefully crafted, calculated plans. You just don't understand. No, it's 48 people sitting around the room, bickering, every day, all day. It's the World Economic Forum who has no standards, has no morals, cannot accept the victories they have, always wanting more. But eventually they'll run out of other people's lives to ruin and will turn on each other. Just like India and China will turn on each other eventually. The only hope Ukraine has is to sacrifice the 20% of land they've lost and realize they've lost it. Most Ukrainians have given up on their government. But there are those, mostly, day in, day out protests, which Europe won't cover, who want to vote on the outcome of this war. And Zelensky won't have it because he knows if it's over, the fanatics behind the war may kill him. He has a chance out of this. I'm sure the British will keep him alive for being a good little sock puppet. He'll go to live in Israel although his wife has long moved on. Although she does show up for photo ops. But ultimately, I find it bizarre that a lot of divorce amongst world leaders does seem to be pretty rare, doesn't it? But it usually happens after, and it's rare even after they, lose power. Heck, the only one that comes to mind was Paul Keating, and he's so inconsequential, the name means nothing to you. So maybe there's something there. He'll probably go live with his wife in Israel. I don't think they're going to southern Florida. I think those are just properties they leveraged because they have so much access to money. It's like how Obama, his let's say, corrupt. He's the reason you pay $1 more for Netflix. Yeah. When he joined Netflix, remember, they put up the price. Well, of course, everyone says the quality of Netflix is down, but there's no competition, is there? What are you going to do? Watch Disney? No, you're going to watch YouTube instead, right? So, drone production. Drone production's a tricky business because you got to get a lot of parts to one place, assemble the drones, and get them out the door before the enemy knows you've done it. Otherwise, you're on next day's target list. This is why these factories are small and produce a dozen or more a day, and they do it at day in, day out, and often relocate to other factories. The bigger the drone, the less they can make per day, and the longer it takes to make them. That's why Russia's switching to more short-range, cheaper drones to whittle down the front lines. These are, is it Banderol? These are the ones that, Lightning 2, yeah. Lightning 2, there's the Gerans. Now, the Gerans did start as a propeller, and still many of them are propeller-driven. However, there's more and more of the Lightning drones, and they just boom. Now, there are larger factories. Yeah, before Duran 4 is like the Shiad, and it is jet-powered, the new version. And the Duran 5 is pretty much another flying torpedo, just like the Flamingo. As you can see on a close-up, they have to, most of the work is wiring from the control boxes. Stack up the drones. Now, these go into the back of pickup trucks. Right, one at a time. They get lined up. Final assembly where they get put on the back of the pickup trucks. Now, some are dropped from aircraft, but most of them are land-launched. Oh, here they go. Yeah, just a pickup truck. They are increasingly hooking into Western GPS, not GLONASS. They cost between 10 to 20,000, depending on their payload. And they are used, and they are often hunted by aircraft, costing the West thousands of dollars a day to hunt them, with no idea. Well, you have to take the chance and at least arm most of them, if not at least half of them. Yeah, because you have no idea which ones are going to make it the target. But eventually, I think, there's just going to be large numbers of drones and no movement on the front. And that might be the signal to the end of the war. Now, no Russian sniper forces have engaged in combat exercises. Inconsequential. But that's a story for another day, isn't it? Just another quick look at the map. Nothing significant. No breakthroughs. Nothing significant. But, yeah. Though it does appear there's been more shelling here in Sumy. the slower it goes, the more bloody it gets, I thought. And I thought it'll get more bloody towards the end. So it's typically what happens historically. So let's see what happens, shall we? But at the moment, that's the only state, really, we know that Russia will never give up is Crimea. Or this part here. But will they give up on taking more territory here in order to complete their operations? Or will they eventually start building a border? At some point, they have to decide how, because it does sound significant at first, 30%, but Putin's always going to have that 30% opposition. So my guess is he will only move when that 2% or 3% of likely voters or supporters moves to become a significant burden. And that is when it's around 5 to 10% of Russians who are no longer participating. And it's the same in Ukraine. What is it, 19% unemployment or something? So Russia's unemployment may be the key indicator to look at or to consider looking at, because it's the same in China. I think the Chinese lying flat movement is the only reason we don't have a war there right now. So, thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate it. It's the only way to grow the channel. And we have advertising revenue, a thing of the past to rely on. You've all heard the announcements. You're all going to hear it. Sooner or later, everyone's going to remind you. No YouTuber, only the top. Unless someone's got 1 million, and even then that is not guaranteed, they're going to get ad revenue. Heck, only YouTube pays the top, has always paid the top 10% of advertisers, well in excess of their budgets to stay on YouTube and produce YouTube videos. We all know that the 10% of producers, or 10 to 20%, get 80% of the views. The rest of us will not get any advertising revenue. That's been leaked. So YouTube wants to cut us all off. So no chance of me ever becoming a YouTube partner, because they are not going to sign on any new partners. They're going to announce a freeze on it. Now, of course, that was the leak, so we'll see what YouTube does. But without your support, it's going to continue just to be struggle. And thank you to all the patrons who support me on Patreon. And thank you to all those who buy my book and buy my merch. Now, all my links are in the link tree description below in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. I appreciate each and every one of you. Bye for now.